Welcome to this lecture on positions. In this lecture we're going to be tying together our uses of classes, IDs, divs and spans in a fun and interesting way, and this is a really good milestone moment where you can kind of feel like you're moving from the beginner CSS to some more intermediate concepts, and this is where you realize how much fun you can start to have with CSS. So positioning is all about now how we can position our different elements and our different divs, and we're going to be talking a lot about divs now, how we're going to be positioning them on our page. And that's either relative to our viewport. What I mean by viewport is pretty much, I'll just call it the page, or how it's positioned relative to another element. So let's get stuck in with the different ones. So I'm just going to write in here the different types of positions that we're going to be going over. Going to be going over static, relative, fixed, and absolute. And we'll go over these one by one. So to begin with static, that's actually a very easy one to do. Static just basically means it's not positioned in any special way. So let's just have a look at that anyway, even though it won't be too interesting. So let's create first of all a div. So a div you can think of as a container, and within this we're just going to put this is static, not positioned in any special way. So then we're going to create a class, and hopefully you can remember how that's done. Use the dot. And then we're just going to call this one pos static, so position static, curly brackets, and I'm going to use position, and then this one is going to be static. Fantastic. Now if we refresh, you'll see there's actually nothing really special about that. But what I'm going to do as well is give them more background colors so that they're more discernible. Or let's go for borders. Background colors gets a bit messy. So let's go for 3px solid green. Okay. Of course, it's not working just yet because we haven't assigned this new class to the div. So we're going to go into here and put div class equals, then what did we call it? Pos static. Okay, now if we refresh the page, you can see that this is now contained in there. Okay, so next up we're going to go for relative. Relative is, how do I say this? Awesome. I love using relative because it's very, very helpful. Basically what happens with relative is you can start to position your elements on different parts of the screen. So I'm going to show you exactly what I mean. I'm going to have within here a header saying this is fixed. How cool is this? And then just for fun I'm going to put in an ordered list just so we have a few different elements in here. I'm just going to put in numbers. Okay, so for this one, let's define the class first. So I'm going to call this one pos. Use the dot first to define the class. Relative. And do you know what's? Yeah. Okay. Cool. And then I'm going to do position, and this is going to be relative. And then let's create a border for it. Let's give it a red back. Let's give it a red color. Okie dokie. So now we just need to assign this class to the element. So to the div. That's relative. Okay. So it doesn't actually look any different to the one above, but basically what's define the position as relative will do is we can now tell it how far away from the left or from the right of the screen we want it to be. So I'm going to put in left, literally just left, and then I want it to be, let's go for 50 pixels away from the left side of the page. As you can see, that's moved it to the left. Fantastic. What if I did top? So just to make sure, we've got top, left, right, and bottom. So from the top. So now it's looking at its nearest element. So it's saying, okay, I'm going to be 50 pixels away from the nearest element, which is this other paragraph. So if I were, for example, to say 0 pixels, it'll be right next to it. If I put 100 pixels, it's going to be further away from it. Or we could say from the right, 0px. So we want it to be right next to the right hand side. Now if we make this bigger, so now to have even more fun with it, I'm going to define the width. Just like we did with images, you can also do this with any element. So for example, for this one, I'm going to give this div a width of 200px. And now that we have a border, you're going to be able to see that's going to get smaller. Fantastic. So now, let's go back to using the left. 50 pixels. Fantastic. Now the next one is a lot of fun. You probably wouldn't be using this as much, but it's called fixed. So we're just going to create another div here. Pause fixed. I'll create the class in a second. This is fixed. Then in here, we're going to create our class. So we're going to call this pos fixed. I just realized in the HTML, I called this one fixed. It's actually relative. So now we're just going to, for pos fixed, we're going to do position fixed. And then let's have it in the bottom right hand corner. So from the bottom, we're going to have it 0px. So it's going to be 0 distance from the bottom, and then from the right, it's also going to be 0 pixels. Let's give it a border of 3. Let's go for 2px for no real reason. Solid blue. Okay, so now if we refresh this, you'll see this at the bottom. And here's what's really interesting about fixed. Let's make this. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a image here, and I'm just going to use the one from the last one, which is called div and span.jpg, because for this fixed position, it's really important that we can scroll up and down. So look where this is fixed is. It actually doesn't change position at all. So no matter how much you scroll through the page, that's going to stay right there in the bottom right. And then finally, we're going to be looking at absolute. So we're just going to put it in here, have a div, and we're going to call it pos absolute. Now, the important thing about having the position of absolute is it needs to be what we call nested, but you can think of it as just being inside another div. So for example, we have this div here that's in the paragraph here, and what we're going to do is put this div inside. We're going to have a paragraph here saying this is absolute, and then we're going to create it here, so dot pos absolute. And so then we're going to put position of absolute. We're going to give it a very small width so that it can fit inside it quite nicely. Let's just go for, I don't know, 40px. And we're going to have it just a little bit from the right hand side of the div. So now if we run this, you will see, well, it's not very apparent right now, let's make this static box larger. So I'm just going to put in the height as 400px. So this is going to be a bit larger now. And let's increase the width ever so slightly. So that's looking a bit better now. Let's give it a border. 2px, solid, red. You can see that it's now looking nicely on the right hand side. Increase that a bit more within this other element. So we've gone over a lot today. So we've gone over static. So the static position is basically where it's just on the page, nothing special going on. Relative is very, very useful in that we can then we can position it relative to the elements near it. So usually if there's no elements to the left or right, for example, it's going to be moving in relation or relative to the page itself. Although if it's under an element like it is here, so this one here is under this box, it's going to move. So if I say, for example, from the top I want it to be 20 pixels, you will see that it moves ever so slightly down away from this one. And then after that we have position fixed. Position fixed just stays on the page and you can dictate where it's going to be wherever. So let's make that a bit higher, for example, or sorry, further to the left. You can overlap and look not so nice, so you need to keep on top of that. But yeah, you can move it wherever you want. And then the position of absolute is where you can move it relative to the other element that it's in. So what I recommend you do is to, as I say always, is to just have a go yourself. Have a go at relative and static first of all, have a bit of fun with fixed, and then give absolute a try. What's really good here is that if you have a go at this yourself and keep trying, not only are you practicing the position, which is so important, but you're also practicing what we've been going over recently with the classes, IDs, divs, and spans. So have a go yourself, and I'll see you in the next lecture.